Two men journey to the bars and restaurants of Scandinavia to find amazing beers, always with the same question.
Hey, what's on tap?
It's time to find out.
Happy New Year! It is the day after New Year's.
It's the day after New Year's Day.
New Year's Day.
So it's 2 days after New Year's Eve.
Well, I said it was the day after New Year's.
Yeah.
So I was still right.
Oh,
you feel better? You get to correct me?
So we've started this year on a wonderful note.
Already you're correcting me.
You're still hungover.
Thanks, Mom.
You're still hungover.
Well, let's just say our New Year's Eve was intense.
We survived.
I don't know how. The alcohol poisoning should have killed us.
No one knows.
Yes.
But it is 2025, and I am ready to get cracking on this year.
Let's get lit. So first up,
but this is like a beer tasting. You don't get lit the first thing you do.
Well, our beer tastings, the first thing we do is we start with like a 15% stout, and then we follow it up with 2 more 15% stouts. So
this is true.
It may not be 2 more. Usually one is a 12% triple IPA or something.
And then we drink a 5.7% lambic that I brought.
Well, that's like 10th beer or something.
Yeah. That is usually how it goes.
I know. But it's still always been a lot of fun.
But today we have 2 beers from Systembolaget. We kind of brought one each, but both of them, before the release, we were messaging each other like, for this release, is there anything we should share? Oh, let's share this one. Oh, let's share this one. And then we bought, yeah. And for... It is a good lesson for some of the Systembolaget releases. I hear some of my newer beer friends, they say, oh, I never buy the expensive ones. And I keep saying them, share them with some friends. Yeah, I know, but I don't know.
It's like 2 or 3 of you go in and suddenly a 200 kroner, $20 bottle of beer doesn't get quite as expensive.
No. Because
you're sharing it with 3 or 4 people. Then suddenly it becomes a pretty reasonable cost. And usually these beers are very high ABV anyway. So it actually is in your best interest to share them anyway.
Yes. And all of a sudden you've got the good basis of a beer share.
Exactly.
Where people bring other things and they don't have to be expensive.
Nope.
Especially if you are new to beer. You maybe you only have tried like a couple of 100 to 500 beers. There's so much on the cheaper side that still needs friends to share them with.
Exactly. And what's better than an excuse to share beers with friends?
There is no better excuse.
I know. And so, yeah, both of these were maybe a little more on the pricier side than we wanted to pay individually.
Yes.
Because we weren't really sure if we were going to like them, but also because we just didn't want to pay that much for these beers.
Exactly.
But when we split it in half, you're like, you know what? I can justify this price now.
Yes.
So first up, we have from Poppels, a brewery we do not feature very often, although they do release quite a bit as Systembolaget through the year, and they are kind of one of the more established Swedish breweries.
Definitely.
That I don't think anyone ever talks about. I mean, and they do very well inside Sweden, and they do exporting. I've seen them internationally in many places. But I'll be damned if I've ever heard anyone talk about anything that they do. Very rarely.
Yeah, I have some of my chat groups on Facebook that involve beer nerds. We know one of the assistant brewers, so Poppels gets mentioned quite a lot. But in our Malmö beer chat, Poppels is never mentioned.
And I think one of the reasons why no one really mentions them is, at least in Skåne, they just aren't on tap.
That is true.
I cannot think of... I mean, it's been a long time since I've seen a Poppels beer on tap here in Malmö.
Yeah, it's only Systembolaget.
Maybe up in Stockholm or Göteborg or Gothenburg. You see them on tap more often. I think they even maybe have a beer bar in Stockholm.
I think they're from Gothenburg.
Or from Gothenburg, I guess.
I
think from Gothenburg. I think they maybe have a beer bar there. But I think that might be the reason why nobody talks about them down here.
Maybe.
Even though they put out a lot of stuff, it just doesn't, come to the kegs here.
Right.
But today we have a collab with Poppels and
Smedsbo Slott. If you've listened carefully, we had I think 2 of their beers.
We've had at least 2 or 3 of their beers. Yeah.
And it's a 12.6% Grand Cru Strongale. Did you try it before we said cheers?
I just sniffed it.
I saw him.
I sniffed it.
Oh, I am offended.
Look, I'm like the pizza guy and the gynecologist. I can smell, but I can't touch.
Oh my god! Already January the 2nd, and we're already cancelled. So the label says notes of Tokai, and that's like. What is it? Romanian Balkan dessert wine? Something.
Sure.
Yeah. Grand Cru Strongale is a barrel-aged, I'm translating, barrel-aged ale with high alcohol. It is a beer with a great body and a fullness with a smooth mouthfeel. The beer has been on kegs on barrels for 24 months, which has given it a complexity and notes of honey, raisin, red apples, and almond. Together with Smedsbo Slott, we've created a sweet beer with a fresh acidity, almost completely with no bitterness, a unique dessert ale.
Yeah, it smells like a dessert wine. It's got a lot of dried fruits on the nose. If they hadn't said raisins, I was going to be like, there's a lot of raisins and dates in the smell. And there's some barrel aging on there. Actually, it smells quite good. It
smells very fruity.
Yeah. Cheers.
Let's try it. Cheers. Oh, you've already tried it.
I haven't tried it yet. Look, you've got my glass.
There's so much more in my glass than yours.
That's only because I poured you a heavier pour. You're so salty, you need to have extra. I'm not sure about this one.
So, it's very jammy. Jammy with the tiniest hint of Flemish red ale, but it doesn't go into Flemish red ale territory because there's a sweetness that balances it back.
This is really sweet. They didn't say honey, but it feels like there's that kind of sweetness to it. It's like a really, really sweet barley wine.
Yeah,
is how I would classify it. It feels like it's going to be definitely a headache in the morning.
Yeah. I said balances it back. That's not what I meant. I meant pulls it back violently. It is too sweet. It
is really, really sweet. It's not cloyingly sweet, but when I said dessert wine, I think I'm not too far off on that one. It definitely falls into that kind of ice wine, sweet, almost kind of getting into syrupiness, and it's not in the texture of the mouthfeel. It's very, very thin, very light, very easy to drink. But that sweetness, it feels like sugar content is kind of what pulls you back from it.
Yeah. It's surprisingly one note. It says complex on the label. I don't agree. I don't get the layers. The more I sip, the more I try to find the complexity in layers.
I'm not getting layers on this at all. I get well, this is honey in it, and honey and raisins and almonds.
No, but those aren't ingredients. Those are tasting notes.
Those are tasting notes. I definitely get the honey and the raisin tasting notes. Very, very strong on those.
Oh, Stefan knew how to translate mandel into almond. He knows more Swedish. We could make this into a Swedish beer podcast.
We could try, and I'd be like,
how's that different from anything else you say on this podcast?
It's just mostly gibberish. Anyway. So this is part of their selection series. It is. Does it have a number or anything? No. So Poppels, I would say maybe once a quarter, twice a quarter, maybe. They put out a special release, which is a 375 milliliter bottle, and do a little fancy white label, and it makes it look pretty nice.
But sometimes
and they do more of an effort into presenting the beer as opposed to the regular. Do they do cans or is it just snub nose bottles?
They definitely do cans.
They do cans.
A lot of cans. But for their more special ones, those are bottles. But the little snub nose, those are also selection series. Like they had some barrel aged imperial stouts. Those were smaller, cute little bottles.
All right. So what?
But I consider them a good brewery. This beer is too much on the sweet side and not too much enough on the complex side. But there are some things I like. So a really weak 375.
For me, this is just a 3.5.
Yeah. We're very close to each other.
I think the sweetness kind of just flatlines the beer too much. It's a little too cloyingly sweet in that. And that's what kind of just really pulls it down for me. I wish there was more, maybe a little carbonation or a little more balance to it, something that would elevate it, but it's just so much sugar that it kind of kills it for me. Right.
Exactly.
So what do we have next?
So next up we have a barley wine from Drake's Brewing Company, released at Systembolaget. It is Santa's Brass Barley Wine Ale aged in whiskey barrels, vintage 2023. And that means that it's aged in Heaven Hill whiskey barrels. I needed to check it out because there's this big Systembolaget sticker that hides some of the qualifying words. I think actually Drake's Brewing is hidden underneath a sticker.
No, it says actually on the label, barley wine aged in Heaven Hill whiskey barrels.
Yeah,
and then they cover up the barcode with their own barcode.
That's fine.
Yeah,
14.6% ABV, and then obviously it costs a little bit too much at Systembolaget to buy by yourself.
Yeah,
so we're sharing it. It looks very dark, like wine.
Yeah, it's a very dark amber kind of color. The smell is. This is barrel aged.
Yeah, in Heaven Hill.
On Heaven Hill, whiskey barrels. Definitely get kind of a woody. Yeah. Boy, I hope this isn't tannic. Let's do this.
Let's try it. It has on the nose. It has a risk of being tannic.
Mm-hmm. Man, that's super drinkable. That is.
What is it's pretty boozy, but it's very drinkable.
This is what I wish the Poppels beer was.
Yeah.
Where it's got the sweetness and it's just right on the edge of being a little too sweet, but doesn't ever cross that line. And then it has, it's a little light on the barrel aging, I think. But what is there plays into kind of a toffee, almost like banana coconut kind of profile. Definitely some esters in there. It's a much better experience.
It's definitely more complex. Mm-hmm. And it kind of depends on what you focus on. Mm-hmm. If you focus just on the alcohol vapors, mm-hmm. it is really boozy. But when you start to sip more and your mouth gets accustomed to it and it's already full of these alcohol mm-hmm. vapors, that's when you get all of the flavors you mentioned. And that's more what I want from a beer, something that changes the more we dissect it. Or if we're not dissecting it, just sitting and sipping it, if it grows or changes, that is interesting to me.
I think barley wines have a greater potential in that area, whereas it warms up, it kind of shifts. I mean, stouts also, if they're too cold, they will definitely go from being kind of muted to really blooming when they come to room temperature or get close to room temperature.
But we were really we took. I'm losing all my words. We did the right thing, and we brought these out of the fridge long time before we started recording this episode.
Yeah, so they had time to kind of warm up and
exactly.
Flourish. Otherwise, I think that the Poppels would have been a lot lower in the ratings, because then it wouldn't have had any kind of
right.
It would just been too cold.
Right. So I think this barley wine would be like 14 to 18 degrees Celsius. way above fridge temperature, but just cold enough to be a pleasant mouthfeel.
Yeah. And I feel like it's probably where we're at right now.
Yeah. It's fun. I'm digging this one. The real challenge now is going back to the Poppels Grand Cru, and if it's overly sweet, then we are.
You get a lot more of the almond on the nose now.
The nose is more interesting.
For me, the nose is almonds and honey.
Yes, it smells like a mead.
It smells very much like a mead. I mean, if you would just give me this and told me it was a traditional mead, I would probably believe you. Because it straight up smells like a hard, traditional honey mead.
Now that I taste it, that's all I can think of.
Yeah. Maybe they should have said this was a mead.
Maybe they should have lied.
I'm going to stick with my original rating on that. I don't think it's gotten better setting out. But the Drake's is quite good. This is a 4.25 for me.
It is for me as well. It might be... It's not pushing towards 4.5, but it's not close to becoming a 4.
Yeah. I mean, it's the minimum 4.25 for me.
Yeah. But I'm really glad we bought it together, and then we should have had it together with either the Christmas calendar or close to Christmas. It is called Santa's Brass.
Well, it is just a week removed from Christmas, so I think it's going to be okay.
But this is a completely different year.
It is a new year, and
now we're aiming towards Easter.
But it is the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah.
So you have that going for it.
That is true.
Well, we'll wrap it up here. You can find us online at What's on Tap Podcast, Instagram, Spotify, Facebook, YouTube, and wherever you find podcasts, you can find What's on Tap. So until next time,
keep drinking the dumb down.